I just want to thank all you guys for coming to this exhibit. Long story short, I was a financial aid student here at Yale, and I remember being completely overwhelmed by the architecture and the history of the university. I would come into the Sterling Library, and I'd go down to the end, turn left, and in the Star Reference Room, I would spend my study breaks going through old Yale banners and old Yale class books, just overwhelmed by the history of the university. And I sort of had like a little talent or a little obsession or addiction with Yale.
Big obsession.
Yeah. One of my roommates is here. So, big obsession with Yale history and trivia. It was unexplained, and also I had a history of obsession with JFK and FDR. But anyway, so I just fell in love with Yale history without explanation. About 10 years ago, I went to a Sunday morning auction at the YMCA in Morristown, New Jersey, and I came across the postcard you see there by Edward Bouchet. And the price is marked on the postcard, which you can see. But basically, Edward Bouchet was at the time believed to be the first African American to go to Yale. And I had asked the postcard dealer, like, how did you get a copy of this postcard? He's like, it was a state sale, this and that. A year later, right behind where Michael's saying, there's a letter by Young Wing, number 8, which is, he's the first Chinese student to go to college in the United States. And it was in 2005. And halfway down the page, it says, he was basically asking a guy who graduated from Yale 4 years earlier, could you send me some study materials, etc., for doing my work? And he said, you know very well the many disadvantages with which I labor. And I sort of, jumped back. I can have 2 hands in a human eye and do cataract surgery with a heart rate of 60. And sometimes when some of these documents came up for auction, I couldn't sleep for a few days. So, but if you go around the room and, just the quick elevator speech is that, there's a letter here by, number 3 is Jacob Hemingway, the first student to go to Yale. He told Ezra Stiles, who was the 7th president, that for the first 6 months, I solus was the only student in Yale College. The Beinecke has a quitclaim from 1732, and that's a quitclaim from 1746, where he and his second wife are quitting claim to her first husband's estate. Number 4 is the most valuable document in this room. Eleazar Wheelock was Yale class in 1733, and he wrote a contract with one of his students who graduated Dartmouth named John Smith. Long story short, John Smith was the first professor of Dartmouth College, and Dartmouth wrote in the Dartmouth Alumni Weekly or Monthly how in 1910 he was the first professor, was the second librarian, etc. So when I donated, all these are the property of the university. I donated these over the last 10 years. But long story short, he basically said, when I was donating to Yale, I emailed the Dartmouth Library. I said, hey, I'm about to donate this contract to Yale. It says, my copy says copy from the original. Do you have the original? And the curator for Dartmouth, 4 days later said, Ravi, we can't find the original. So the original contract for the first professor giving him an acre of land, a cow, whatever, is number 4. And so if a Dartmouth curator wants to figure out what it actually says, they have to come to Yale. Number 5, Horace Holley, is it's an amazing document. Horace Holley was class of 1803. He was the 2nd or 3rd president of Transylvania University. That's the first letter that's actually quoted in a book. And actually, is David here? David Richards here? David still here? Oh, David Richards, the author of Skulls and Keys. That's the 2nd book. He's the gentleman who tapped George W. Bush for Skullenbones. That's actually, some of my letters are quoted in that book also. And as far as I know, 2 of my letters have been quoted in senior essays, so that's kind of cool also. But I don't want to bore you guys. There is, number 11, John Jacob Edict writes to his brother, and on the 2nd page he says, there was one of our class who left yesterday on account of the secession. He was from Georgia. And I was having dinner with a Yale senior who wrote, Heather May. Do you remember Heather May, Professor Gitlin? It's her 5th year Regan. She wrote her senior essay on Yale and the Civil War, and she included that letter as one of the 4. I tracked down who that student from Georgia was who had to leave. The Bouchet postcard I mentioned. Oh, the number 16 is the Reuven Kossakoff collection. You guys are all asking how I find these things, but the story on this one is in January of 2012, a curate at the Connecticut paper auction, papers from Reuben Kosikoff, who was born in 1898 to 1987. He studied at the Yale School of Music from 1908 to 1913. So from the age of 10 to 15, his family moved to New York so he could study what became the Juilliard. And then he went to Europe and became a musician, and he had 2 twin sons. But he had mailed a bunch of music to his sister, Stella Nahum, who's also a musician. And he died in 87, she died in 88, and all the papers showed up in Stella Nahum's estate. And then was transferred, and I bought them. But usually I don't reveal that I own something until I donate it. But as it was being mailed to me, I emailed a Yale classmate who was in TD. I said, look, you're a professor of Jewish music history, you're a professor of Jewish Judaism. I said, I own these papers from one of the fathers of modern American Jewish music composing history. And so it was just a fun find. And I'm at the 20th reunion, I cornered President Levin, and I told him this story. And I said, this is my gift for the 20th reunion. And he turned to his wife and said, Ravi collects documents related to Yale history. So that was a nice moment. Number 17 and 18. Number 17 is Henry Roe Cloud. I've told the story, but I was taking the Amtrak up from Philadelphia to the Harvard Yale game of 2011, and I was bidding on a silver tray for the Elihu Club. And when members of Elihu get married, they have the bride and the groom and the members of the delegation. And they had all the members of the delegation in 1910. One of the names was H.R. Cloud. And I was like, who has the last name Cloud? The archivist sent me the name of all the members and did histories on all of them. There was a book called The Yale Indian. So I started tracking Cloud. A year later, some beaded napkin ring holders showed up on eBay, anonymously. I emailed the guy, I said, why are you selling beaded napkin ring holders from the estate of Henry Roe Cloud? He said, I'm his great-grandson. I said, look, I'm not interested in beaded napkin ring holders. What else do you got? He said, I own all his papers. I own his autobiography, like a dozen photos, his Yale degree, his Yale master's, his high school diploma, etc. I said, all right, what do you want for it? And so I bought that directly. And actually, here's a story for you, Bill. He had contacted the Yale Library the year before. He said, I'd like to sell these to the university. And thankfully, the university does not purchase documents like that. They'll accept donations, but they won't purchase documents. So that was a nice advantage. This letter, 19, from Henry Roe Cloud. One of his classmates in 1910 became the Chinese ambassador to the United States. And he walks up to the ambassador during the snow, and he says, I stepped up with my heart in my throat when the ambassador said, Henry Cloud, how stout you are. What have you been eating? I replied, wild turkey and buffalo meat. The dainty, sweet, pretty daughter standing next to him in the receiving line said sweetly, and butter perhaps? And actually the library, one of the curators of the library actually blogged about this letter. And my fear is that I want to translate, I don't have time to translate these things, but I think by Google search you can find the gems in these papers. This Dean Acheson letter, this Dean Acheson manuscript is signed by Dean Acheson. And this I tracked down to when his bust was unveiled at the Truman Library in 1962. And I tracked down the original owner to being like a teenage student in high school in Independence, Missouri. And I think that ended up in his estate. So at the Harvard Yale game, I thought I was being served orange juice, but I was not. And of 2015, the president's reception, and I pigeonholed the Secretary of State, Secretary of State Kerry. I said, Secretary Kerry, I said, I own Pershing's Bones album, and he had a security detail with him. He's like, you're kidding. John Kerry's best friend at Yale was a guy named Richard Warren Pershing, who was the grandson of General Pershing of World War I. Richard Warren Pershing served in Vietnam, was killed in 1968 in Vietnam. That Skull and Bones album went from Richard Warren Pershing to his brother, John Pershing III. John Pershing III married Richard Warren Pershing's fiancée, Sheila Gay. And they had no children, and they divorced. But when he died, when the brother died in 1999, his estate was settled, and his friend showed up at the apartment or condominium that he had, and literally, and I don't have this documented, but I think I spoke to the seller. This was in the trash and destined for destruction. So the friend, like pulled it out for the trash, take the trash, and he kept it for close to 20 years. But then he sold it, and I tried to lowball him by $100. He's like, I know what this is worth, he said to me, and I said, okay, I'll give it to you. So, and then, but this Skull and Bones album. Now, I'll tell you an interesting story. This Skull and Bones album has John Kerry, the founder of FedEx, Fred Smith, Richard Warren Pershing, John Kerry's brother-in-law from his first marriage, as well as Mr. Ramsey, who was descended from a Mason. And he's given the largest map collection to Stanford University. He's a big map collector. So this is a treasure. And luckily, I had found, and David Richards has left, but the George H.W. Bush Skull and Bones album, not his personally, but one of his classmates. That was at an estate sale for like $1,000, and David Richards did not buy it. It ended up at a New York book dealer wanted 5 figures for it. And so I was luckily, I've never seen that, nor do I own it, but I was able to use that as a comparison for that. But basically, so I did the math, and out of 160 years, from 1860 to 1918 to 2018, there are about 65 classes that have Skull and Bones, Scroll and Key, and Wolf's Head. They have these photo albums. Yale owns about 28 Skull and Bones and about 18 Scroll and Key. And I have since found the 1910 for Robert A. Taft, the son of the president, and about 6 Scroll and Key, including there was a Scroll and Key guy in 1918 who won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1953. Benjamin Stock's delegation. I gotta go. Sorry, but I want to thank all you guys for coming here. This is like about 10% of what the collection is. I'm gonna let you guys mingle around. If you have any questions at all, please grab me. A big thank you to Bill Massa, who is the head of collections here at Manuscripts and Archives. And the Manuscripts and Archives staff, he curated this collection for me, and he wrote all the, he wrote everything up, and he put everything in the nice Mylar. Number 12 is the 1874 Skull and Bones letters. There are like 50 letters between students. Sign yours in the bones, yours, 322, etc. That's my biggest regret of I think I donated that too early. I wish I'd started that. So please enjoy it, and thanks for coming out. And a good man.